In an era where AI promises unprecedented efficiency, a darker digital reality lurks beneath the rising tide of sophisticated cyber threats. As technology empowers innovation, it simultaneously arms cybercriminals with powerful tools to exploit organizational vulnerabilities. Welcome to the Policybazaar for Business show partnered by ET Now. I'm Kavita Thapliyal, and today we are diving into the critical world of cyber resilience, exploring how businesses can transform from potential victims to proactive defenders in their digital battleground. Joining me in this conversation, I have with me Amir Subhash Lakeshri, cyber expert, Tarun Mathur, co-founder and chief business officer, Policybazaar for Business. All right, Amay and Tarun, welcome to the show. And Amay, I would like to start with you because it's very important, to help our viewers get the lay of the land. We are talking about cybersecurity for businesses over here. What is the ground reality? And when we talk about organizations and companies getting themselves covered by all the kind of cyber attacks, what do we actually mean by that? And what are the vulnerabilities that we are talking about?
Sure. I'll say even when you talk about the organizations, people are still the weakest link, right? And they are prone to attacks and all that, right? And that's where we see the phishing attacks are increasing, right? Apart from that, there are AI-based attacks, which definitely will cover, more in detail. And when we talk about the vulnerability, trust me, I've gone through various incidents, right? And
like, for example?
Like ransomware or data exfiltration, or BEC, business email compromise, right? Those are the different attack types. And what we have seen, the basics are missing, right? You have a good controls in place, good technologies in place, but they are not well configured. So there are vulnerabilities existing on that. It's about managing those vulnerabilities in a way, right? It's an art, right? To have a right kind of, framework on that. Where some criticals are there needs to be addressed immediately.
Sure.
Some high level are there which needs to be addressed in 1 or 2 days depending on the business impact. So that level of understanding and people you need to have in your system who takes the remediation call based on the priority and the impact or the severity of the vulnerability.
Sure.
Right. And the common one are like misconfiguration. Then we also see top 10 OWSP attacks, which are their vulnerabilities are there on applications. And apart from that,
this is too technical. You might just have to break down and help our viewers understand what are these attacks also in the first place.
So these are the framework type of standards.
Okay.
Top 10 are the vulnerability checks which needs to be done on the applications or the network side.
Sure.
It's a standard.
Okay.
Right. And that's where we perform those checks and understand. And we have seen those vulnerabilities remains, open for a longer period. And that becomes a challenge. Second, we have seen the legacy systems. Right. And then we see people are going for a cloud adoption. Right. In that transformation, we see the misconfigurations. And where the attackers gain access, through the different misconfiguration. And vulnerability again remains open because you are involving new, assets into your landscape.
Sure.
Right. So first and very simple thought is you need to understand your digital footprint. Where all your assets are, how they are exposed over the internet, right? Who have access to that, how they have, and what is your business. So it's at the end in one liner, you have to enable the business in secure way. You need to have all these controls where you're talking about people as well as processes and technology. You have to marry all three of them together.
Exactly. It's going to be a very comprehensive plan that business organization need to go ahead with. But how is Policybazaar with your initiative and with your kind of a coverage helping organization and businesses deal with these vulnerabilities?
See, I think the primary objective that Policybazaar for Business has is to make sure that we take end-to-end care of the customer here. Right? And most organizations do not have a clue on what exactly is their digital trail, footprints, etc.
Sure.
So I think the first thing that we do is we first try and understand, how much water are we in. We go to companies, we run a vulnerability report on their systems, sitting outside, not inside, and say, where do they lie? On a scale of let's say 1 to 10, are they secure 8 or are they secure 4? And I think the measures that we need to take, the companies themselves need to take, depends on where you are the spectrum. If somebody's at 8, great, a normal plan will work. They're already taken care of. Their CTO is given enough sort of time and understanding to what their systems, how vulnerable the systems are.
Sure.
But there is somebody on a scale of 4 because they believe that they don't need, any sort of coverage. They think that they're companies that they don't really have customer information. for example, there's a pharmaceutical company, right? They thought that they really didn't need any cyber covers. And, we went to them and said, don't you keep a lot of your data, like your trade secrets on a cloud? Aren't you on emails? Aren't when you're talking to folks, let's say back in Bulgaria, wherever you based out of, are you not kind of communicating with them? And they said, yes. And I said, so you can't really sit on a vulnerability score of 4. You need to kind of do something about it, right? And insurance has nothing to do with it. It's just about your own systems, because the eventuality of an attack is similar for everybody, and somebody who's as prolific as you are would need kind of a cover against at least a sort of a wall between you and somebody, an entity trying to kind of reach you. So I think that understanding is very important. So when we go and speak to clients, we just don't go and pitch out saying, okay, just buy this insurance from us. Can you first check where do you belong? What do you need to do? Because a product can be customized to your problem. But till you've identified your own problem, you won't see one, the importance of it, and two, exactly how how specific does it need to be to your own need.
Right. I would really like to understand the post-attack phase and the recovery part aspect of this also. But then when you talk about cyber attacks for organizations, are there any specific sector companies that we're talking about? Are there a specific type of vulnerabilities attached to a specific sector that are attacked most?
So, there are certain sectors where we see the attacks has increased, specifically after COVID. Those are like healthcare, the major one. We have seen in cyber war situations, we have seen, the government agencies are getting a lot of attacks on that.
Exactly.
But mostly then after that, they get shifted to their motivation of financial. The sophistication of attacker has changed nowadays from script kiddies to the, you can say state-sponsored attacks. Again, the financial motivation, and the motivation keeps on changing, right? And it's quite easy for them because nowhere you need to be techie, right? It's a ransomware as a service which is available. So ransomware is one of the biggest threat, and the data exfiltration is the biggest threat available for the organizations, right? And they have to actually work in a different manner to protect the organizations. And trust me, organizations do a lot of things and they sometimes miss the basics. Right, and for that only there are frameworks, right? There are different standards like NIST, ISO regulatories, etc. There, right? RBI also keeps on talking about the different guidelines, right? Adhering to that will help you to build a framework in the organization, and there are a lot of different initiatives also taken care by sometimes we hear from the Gartner kind of agencies. In 2019, I believe they came up with the zero trust architecture. So zero trust is like don't trust anyone but verify them. Right? So that will give access, for example, to particular laptop or any asset on need to know basis, only for authorized period and only to authorized person, with multi-factor authentication and various authentication involved into that. Right? So that restrict the usage of the particular data and the asset, right? When we say to the particular user who is authorized to do so from the authorized location and the device. So when we say, let's talk about the Y2K, right? When year 2000 came, the computer came into the picture and all that, and we see that entire decade was asset driven. So you can refer to ISO 27000 2005, right? Which is asset driven controls well. Next decade was the process driven. Right? Which is ISO 27001 again 2013 model. Now it is data driven. Right, and again you have to understand because your data is everywhere.
Exactly.
Right, it is on cloud, it is on your phone, it is shared with third parties, your vendors, right, your customers, and that's where the more data is being used, we can call it. There is on the opposite side, there's a crisis of confidence, right, from the data user. Like I'm giving a lot of data to certain companies, but there is a crisis of confidence will come into the picture, and that's where again different laws will come, DPDP, etc., which are coming and will help us into that. So those laws, regulatory bodies, guidelines, frameworks, all this if you have together on plate, and if you understand your business and have a tailored solution for that, because every business will have a tailored solution. So if you have it, then I think probably you can have at least reduce the risk towards you. You cannot always say that there will not be any attack. Attacks will happen. Right? You need to be ready for that.
I have a robust system for that. So taking a cue from Ameya and talking about the data-driven analysis that you offer, can you please just explain that, elaborate more on that? How do you help organizations by the kind of backtrack running that you have for your data?
I think there are two levels at which we look at data. One is from an industry perspective, and one is for a specific customer. So from industry, we've now extracted data from mostly from the US, because that's where cyber insurance is done quite well.
Okay.
To look at what are the different vulnerabilities that one should check for when it comes to different industries. So let's say a company like Policybazaar, where we have customer data, is very different from let us say the pharmaceutical example that I gave you, where they don't have any customer information, but they have a lot of information around the tests that they do. They don't trade secrets of what what the secret sauce behind their medicine, so on and so forth. So the first level of data is trying to understand, okay, which industry has what kind of problems and how we're going to deal with them, and then designing a product for that. And then the specific needs of a particular company. See, every company has something genius that they're doing, which is why they do it really well.
Exactly.
Right. And somewhere and that's the part that they have to protect the most. And everything is digital. Like I mentioned, everything's on the cloud these days, which is as vulnerable as invulnerable, because some people say that having it on the cloud is actually safer, because you have one is that you have data and you have data backups, but the other part is because it goes to the cloud and there is this road to go into the cloud, which is always vulnerable. That does attract a lot of not so wanted elements. So somewhere we look at data in terms of where does the real problem lie and how can we cover for them more. Like if you look at ransomware as a service that started, right, we have to see which companies do these guys actually go for, who has how much competition, what is state-led, what is company-led, and all of these things help us design a product with specific. For example, if you were to insure Policybazaar for business, what would be our most the largest asset that we have, the most valuable asset that we have is the customer information. So if somebody was insuring, they would make sure that I have that piece really locked down in a metal box. The second part is, if something were to happen, what do I need to do? So there should be an IT consultant who's going to help us. There should be a lawyer who's going to kind of deal with something such as ransomware. C is that we need to kind of keep running audits and checks to make sure that there is no, at no point in time, a slip up in that data. So I think when you look at data, it does translate into telling you what is required to look into. And then with that same data, you're able to say, okay, what is the kind of cover that you need? For example, if a ransomware guy did get your data, is it customer information? Is it their health data, which is one of the largest sweet spots for these ransomware guys? And then be able to ensure that. So customer data might be worth, let's say, $1 million, and let's say something like, I don't know, your company's financial information might be secondary in that respect. So that is how we design products. That is why we can figure out what is it that you do. I think it's not a simple off-the-shelf purchase. I think there's a lot of research that goes into aligning what plan works best for a company. So this is what we're doing right now, and I think this will become far better as we move forward, and that data in India becomes richer.
Right.
Because I think we have very little data on what lies in our country, and that's also because of lack of insurance that exists in our country.
It's time for a short break, but our special feature of the Policybazaar for Business show, partnered by ET Now, continues on the other side. We'll be right back. Welcome back. You're watching Policybazaar for Business show, partnered by ET Now. I also want to ask you about the way Indian companies actually talk about cyber insurance. Are they averse to it? Do they understand when you reach out to them what all goes into the hand-holding of Indian companies when it comes to getting themselves covered by cyber attacks?
I think I wouldn't criticize companies very much,
Sure.
but I do see, like me, they don't. I think they sleep very well at night without cyber insurance, and I think they shouldn't. I think that the limited point I have is that it should trouble you, because it could lead to a company's, for the lack of a better word, implosion if that data comes out. I mean, look at it. If there's one company which is solely on customer information and they have a breach, people will just stop buying. People will just stop trusting.
Yeah.
And that, every company is a commercial company, right? You have a commercial interest in the world, which is why you exist. Now, if your customers stop coming to you, that I think is the worst thing that could happen. And that the reputational loss you spoke about is, in a way, could make or break companies. So when we go to companies, we do feel that they've started realizing the importance, which is why I love shows like this. We're able to talk about it and people watch it and they understand with, it's just like, what could happen to them. But I think that it requires a lot more for people to actually think of it like term life insurance or your own health insurance. They're thinking, of it as a catastrophe cover. It should make or break your company. I think till that realization comes in, I think we're a long way away from that.
Talking about having a robust system, and both of you give examples of US being one of the best economies where they really deal with all of this really well. So if you could just explain the kind of robust cybersecurity systems they have in the US, and also now in India, technology has advanced. Every week we see a new kind of cyber attack or anything for an individual or organization. The AI-enabled attack, especially. So how are they getting more sophisticated? You did touch upon it in your first answer as well.
So I'll put it in this way. We all go to the marriages, right? And then we go to the reception, and then we click photos, right? For memory, of course. Then once we see the album, right, you will see 1 or 2 kids, they are in most of the photos. So AI and ML are those kids today. They are everywhere, right? Okay. And it's
interesting.
It's a double-edged sword, right? Even attackers are using it. It's up to us what is the intent to be used for that.
Right.
And yes, as I said, one of the example is deep fake videos. Or we can talk about the CEO impersonation.
Okay, that's happening to organizations as well, because deepfake is in news for individual attacks. Okay.
So it is, I'll tell you, CEO impersonation is quite, I'll say, have increased a lot, this rate. So I'll give you an example. A finance person, overnight he or she will get a call or WhatsApp message where he can or she can see the photo of his MD or the senior person asking for it. Then there will be a link.
This has been
right? And they will get a link. They will click on the link. They'll join the call. It can be any platform. I don't want to name it. It can be any platform. And once they join, they will see a person, a lookalike person, is talking in the same language, same voice as well. But that's not the real person. And it's a live interaction, which can happen. So that is happening because of the AI usage, right? On the deepfake side and the impersonation side. So we have to understand that, we need to identify those indicators, right? How to identify this kind of fake AI-enabled videos, etc. There are a lot of indicators you can see. You can see delay in talking. You can see the person is not exactly the same. But probably how will you, identify at the end? You need to cross-check. Because they'll ask you to do some payment. They'll ask you want some files to be shared, data to be shared. If, for example, if MD is calling you and telling you, okay, I need this file right away on my phone, you have no option but to probably answer that. But it's always good to cross-check with the right person. Whether do they really need this, right? Is it a valid requirement or not? That's what one is the AI-enabled one, right? Now, on the other side, you need to have AI-enabled solutions as well. Because every time you cannot go and protect employees, right? Because trusting that they will identify this. So you can put some controls on that where technologies will come and identify those kind of deepfake videos, right? Or those kind of deepfake, I'll say, calls happening into your environment, right? That is similar way, same but possible, but not yet to that level.
Sure.
But still, that's where I see the awareness is the key component over here for the people.
Yeah, awareness. Actually, that's actually the key. But then what about the post-attack process? How would you like to explain that?
See, I think today what at least Policybazaar for Business is offering is actually taking care of the entire incident management. I'll explain this. See, when an attack happens, the company is least prepared. And that's always the case, right? You really don't want it to happen. And when it happens, it's like it's larger than life. And at that point in time, and I remember this happening in one company, there was a CTO who was there. Now, please understand, CTO is excellent at systems, excellent at a lot of stuff which is around technology and what is the evolution of the company. But they aren't really the best negotiators out there. They've all studied engineering, and we know how engineering boys are with girls, right? So imagine those guys trying to now convince a ransomware guy to release their data. And I always say this, that is where you need somebody who's done this, who's proficient, who understands the whole system. So we have a set of IT consultants and a bunch of lawyers who will actually speak to the guys who've got the data under their control. And it's not that simple. If you ask somebody who's not a public speaker to kind of go and negotiate with someone and he says, okay, I need $1 million, he will say, I have an insurance of $1 million, take my money, but just give my data back.
Right.
But that's not how it works. What really happens is that the guy will say, okay, give me the $1 million, and they might disappear. Your data may not come back. Your data may be erased. So how do you make sure that you're negotiating in a way that the data starts coming back? They give you control back of your servers or your systems or whichever way, and then also negotiate for your insurance amounts, because you can't just give it away. Otherwise, they will know that you have an insurance for $1 million and come back all over again.
Right.
So I think the incident management is very, very important. you've got to have the right people involved. That is where data actually comes into place, saying, okay, who's got us control of our data? What do they do? What is their modus operandi? We've got to get the authorities involved. We've got to go through a whole system. When that is done, you will realize that companies like these stop getting attacked. In the US, it's like having a house with a large padlock and a house which is open. The thief will also choose the house that's open instead of the one with the padlock.
Sure.
So the more you start managing this piece well, and we've got now enough companies and consultants who are able to do it, then these companies stop getting attacked because they know that they don't want to also speak. They want to speak to somebody who's far more vulnerable, far more out there, far thinking that we can do it on our own. That's what people these elements relish. So I think the whole management part has to become better, and the companies should kind of trust more and more consultants. If you buy insurance from us, we will kind of take care of the entire piece. So if you bought a policy from Policybazaar for business, you don't have to worry about the vulnerability of a system, because we'll keep checking that. You don't have to worry about the incident. You don't have to worry about the payments. We will take care of it all. But I think even if you're not doing that from your own perspective, you need to have an expert who looks at your systems and manages the incident. Just as you would a doctor kind of looking at you if you're not well.
So large companies might still be having all of these covers, but then what about small businesses? That's the concern area and point?
Yeah, it is. I mean, I'll say even any company in that, I think he has covered this, but when there is an incident, it's a panic situation, right? So the more you practice, you need to have different drills to be conducted on the incident response. You need to have a robust plan for that, policy for that. For incident response, you need to have a kind of you can say
drills and drills. I'm sorry, I got stuck on drills. So it's actual hacking or
yes. So you will switch over from your primary location and you will try to enable the business from some DR other location, disaster recovery location. So for example, we are sitting here, all the servers are here. By any chance, any attack happens, cyber incident happens here, and then we need to enable it from say Chennai location, from your other office. So that all the data should be there. With the right RPO recovery point or the recovery within the recovery time, it should be replicated there and enabled from there, right? That's how it should be. So for that, even small organization, I think more likely I'll say startups also, they go for the first business enablement, right? And one thing everybody's missing is they have to invest in incident response, right? That is more important, right? Because that is somewhere connected to business continuity only. So to have a business continuity plan, you need to have a IT disaster recovery or the business disaster recovery. And for that, you need to have a good incident response plan as well in place. Right. So the problem is for everyone, similar it is. But yes, there are certain things which can be taken care of even without a big budget. So even small companies can also go for it and follow these controls, having a right backups in place, having a isolated backups in place, right? We call it as an air-gapped backup. Right. So when there is an incident, sometimes we see even the backups are also encrypted. Your main data as well as the backups are gone. Now what will you do? How will you restore back? Right. So you need to have a good plan for that. That you have something, offline backups where you can bring it back. And from that point, you can start the business.
So how would you like to explain the small businesses? And you said that you customize plans for business also. So what kind of customization is needed for maybe startups or someone who's just started out?
I think the products need to be customized to startups. And of course, the sum insurance will be very different for a startup versus, let's say, a large organization. But that aside, the program that we offer is the same for large company or small company. We will look after the company's own systems and B, the incident response mechanism. But I think the problems are very, very different. The problem that the SME or a startup is thinking about how to grow their business. Whereas, let's say, larger corporations have to protect their own businesses. So the thinking changes, which is why, like you said, the SMEs are far more vulnerable, are not actually thinking about how much cyber threat is and how big it is. I think that has to be addressed. And I think only shows like this will be able to address it. But what we're also kind of looking at is how do the SMEs protect the data? How do they keep their systems? And that, I think, is a second problem that we are looking at, right? A lot of the servers are desktops. Now, you can argue whether, having a desktop which is local is actually better. But, that's the amount of attention they give to data. So from our perspective, we keep the proposition exactly the same, but we kind of change, the limits are very, very different. But these small organizations that become larger very quickly. So I know of one startup which grew about 300x in about 2 years. And they had almost an archaic policy, if you would. Luckily for them, they were attempted, their breach was attempted, but something worked for them, and they were able to insure after that.
Okay.
But you see, smaller organizations also have to look at it, and I think every startup has to go through this. If they have the right investors, they will have it. You have what he explained as a disaster recovery and business continuity plan. If you've got that in place, I'm telling you that 50% of your work is already done.
Okay.
And there's a lot that goes beyond that. But smaller companies aren't looking at it like that, right? And then you could argue that, let's say, a manufacturing setup, what really, how much disaster recovery can they kind of afford?
Sure.
But having that in shape also helps you buy insurance very well. Today, we cannot almost give you a good policy if you don't have a disaster recovery and business continuity plan. So I think startups have to kind of look at it. They are forced to look at it, as long as they also think about it, not just a piece of paper and something that can have action. I think it'll really work out.
All right. This brings me to the end of the show. I do have a lot of questions, but then my time is up. Thank you so much for being on the show today. Thank you so much. That'll be all from my end. Thank you so much for watching. Goodbye.